Hey folks, this week Torvalds rants over the completely crazy Rust format checking, and we're talking about Bcachefs and its life outside of the kernel. Google has backed up slightly on the developer verification for upcoming Google Android releases. Wine finally supports NT-Sync. Alpine is doing a user-merged file system. Stay tuned to find out what that and more even means. You don't want to miss it.
Podcasts you love
from people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is the Untitled Linux Show, episode 223, recorded Saturday, October the 4th, doing what Windows never could. Hey folks, it is Saturday, and you know what that means. It is time for the Untitled Linux Show. We're going to get geeky with hardware and software. We're going to talk Linux and open source, probably some gaming, some other stuff. It's going to be fun. So let's dive into it. It is not just me, of course. I've got the guys. We've got Jeff and we've got Ken. We've got stories to talk about. But first off, how are you guys doing?
Doing all right. Definitely interested in that Raspberry Pi 500.
It's right over there. We'll talk about it here in just a minute.
No, I'm doing pretty good, and things have been going good. Cachie's still going good. Yeah, I've been one. Okay, it's not.
How's your relationship with Firefox?
Well, it's a little hit or miss. So before the show here, I was playing with it, and I was telling people I'm on Chromium right now for Restream because I can't get Firefox working with the loopback camera, and it has before. So I don't know what's going on. I started Firefox first. I've started OBS first. I've rebooted. I've done a bunch of things, and once in a while,
when you get a chance, go into Firefox and clear your camera settings for all your websites.
Okay.
It's worth a try.
I even thought about what I need to try is it didn't work before, but it's been about a couple months, is the loop back with the pipe wire. So then I could maybe even get in there and directly let me unplug this and put it in here. And
yeah, so OBS has an open, I think there is a pull request even that is essentially the Pipewire virtual camera. There's multiple pull requests, Pipewire related pull requests in OBS. But the one that I've been following is a Pipewire virtual camera, and it kind of stalled for the longest time. And it's got activity on it once again in the last week. And the sort of the latest semi-official word is that they are waiting for things in the XDG desktop portal to happen, to be able to support. So the XDG desktop portal, that is the thing that basically pops up and says, this app is asking for permissions to do something. That's what pops up when you go to do screen sharing in Linux under Wayland. And so they are waiting for this feature to land there. And once that happens, then it's going to be much easier to land the Pipewire virtual camera in OBS, because they want to make that work from within like Flatpak or within Snap. And so you've got to have this permissions bit of it worked out. So I'm still hopeful that sooner or later we will get this, because it would be extremely nice to be able to dump the old Video for Linux 2 loopback that is a kernel driver and an out-of-tree kernel driver, by the way. The whole thing is a little janky. So being able to do it with Pipewire would be really quite nice.
So this show really is literally held together with duct tape and a little bit of masking tape and positive thinking.
Yeah. Not quite as bad as Floss is, because that one I literally do the entire thing from OBS, whereas here we use Restream to help out. But it's lots of Pipewire, lots of FFmpeg, lots of OBS. I think that's what holds the entire streaming world together, is those three technologies.
Well, and
the
just so everybody knows,
one being FFmpeg.
FFmpeg does everything.
Yeah, I actually though could do this without OBS. It's just the chroma key in Restream isn't very good.
Right. Yeah. There's a lot of things like that work better if you're hosting it yourself.
But my youngest son did move out, so I'm going to be probably in a couple months moving my
studio
desk into making an office, and then I might not even have a background. I might just have a chroma. I just have a nice background, kind of like Jonathan, where he doesn't have to worry about green screens and chroma keying and any of that.
Share pictures of the studio build as you do it. That'll be fun.
All right, I will.
Or set them up behind, so they do a slideshow behind you during the show.
Please don't. All right, so I've got a new gizmo that finally came in. I am excited about it. I've already started playing with it. I've got the Raspberry Pi 500 Plus. It's over there on the desk. It's actually in use. That's why I'm not dragging it over here to actually show it to you. Look, I've been trying to do a compilation of Meshtastic D from source on it today. That's one of the things I've been poking at, because we've had some people that have complained about problems on Trixie. So that's the other thing I'm testing out. I figured I would come and give you a quick review of Meshtastic D. A quick review of Trixie and a quick review of the Pi 500 Plus, and what my experience has been, and the one thing that I wish they would change. So the 500 Plus, I've had a great experience with it so far. The keyboard is really nice. The 16 gigs of RAM is really nice, and the NVMe is really pretty good. The NVMe it comes with is 256 gigs. And so that is the one thing that I wish they would change, is I wish there was an option to have it to ship with no NVMe. So you could bring your own storage. And they could knock a good $35 off the price, I think. Then I could put a 1 terabyte Micron or whatever in there and be good to go with that. But other than that, I have no complaints about it. I've really had a good experience. Now, it came out of box with the Raspberry Pi OS 12 installed on it, and that was fine. But then, like the day after it came, they announced, or the day before, very, very soon around the same time, they announced the availability of 13, of Trixie, the Trixie-based Raspberry Pi OS. And so I said, well, people are having trouble with this. I need to go test it. Let's see what it's like on there. It'd be great to be able to talk about it on this show as well. And so I did the install. We're going to talk at the end of the show about that install, by the way, because I learned a very cool trick. But I threw Raspberry Pi OS Trixie on there, booted it up. Everything just works. I don't know if it's confirmation bias or not, but like the whole system felt just a little bit more responsive. Like it was just a little bit better. It pretty much looks the same. They've got a couple of new features in there, like the ability to add printers more easily. There's some other things that have been touched up. But so far, I mean, it's been kind of a boring experience going to the Debian 13 base, which is what you want. I don't have any complaints about it. Wizardling in our chat says, I wish they could have made the M.2 slot more easily accessible. And I would agree with that. I think it would have made sense to put a little, access panel on there that you unscrew and just pop to be able to get to it. But it's not a deal breaker.
Well, and if you have an M.2 slot, you can put an adapter to a U.2, because basically it's almost the same thing. And then that opens you up you could put like a 30 terabyte SSD on that baby. Talk about media server, or bigger. It is basically a full fat 1X PCI Express 3, I think, lane. And so there's a lot of stuff that you can do with that. If you want to see someone just absolutely go nuts, check out Jeff Geerling's channel. And of course, he has been, in fact, just today, he was live streaming, rotating through various GPUs, like full-size desktop GPUs hanging off of that port. And, of course, he was running Crysis on it and all kinds of other stuff. And having pretty good success with it. He ran one of the LLMs. I think it was ChatGPT's open source LLM. So it's running on the Raspberry Pi on this, big desktop GPU. And he asked the LLM,
can you run on a Raspberry Pi? And the LLM's response was, no way. There's no way to do that. It was fun.
Side note too, you had Trixie on there, and we're not talking about it today, but Mint released their Debian edition, because they're actually, normally they're based off Ubuntu, but now they have a LMDE, which is just in case something happens or Ubuntu gets too locked down, they're able to still continue with Mint. So it just seems like since Trixie, Debian is really gaining some momentum, I've noticed.
Yeah, well, so the whole deal with Debian is that they weren't willing to include certain things like the NVIDIA packages. They weren't willing to include any of that closed source stuff by default. And they've kind of softened their stance on that. I think some of their firmware packages as well changed what they were willing to include. And so that really stole a lot of the thunder out of, say, Ubuntu. It's one of the big differences between Ubuntu and Debian. So yeah, there has been sort of a walk back towards, maybe Debian's not so bad after all. Just run Debian. It's been interesting to see.
Yeah, because now that they allow the non-free, you took a big chunk of what Ubuntu
What made it special? Yeah.
But I still would recommend Ubuntu as one of the, newbie distributions, that and Fedora, because just going with Cache, I have noticed when I've looked things up, it's a little harder to find. It's not terrible, and being an experienced Linux user, I kind of know what rocks to turn over.
Right.
But, mom or grandma or somebody or grandpa, you put Ubuntu space question, oh, here you go. Cache, a little more digging. So I can, and
I may touch on one of the reasons why in one of my articles later.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Look forward to it. All right. Here in a minute, we're going to talk to, we turn it over to Jeff, and he's going to talk about some completely crazy stuff going on in the kernel. But before we get there, we're going to take a quick break and be right back.
Hey everybody, it's Leo Laporte. You know about MacBreak Weekly, right? You don't? Oh, if you're a Macintosh fan or you just want to keep up what's going on with Apple, this is the show for you. Every Tuesday, Andy Anako, Alex Lindsay, Jason Snell, and I get together and talk about the week's Apple news. It's an easy subscription. Just go to your favorite podcast client and search for MacBreak Weekly or visit our website, twit.tv/MBW. You don't want to miss a week of MacBreak Weekly.
Okay, we don't have a real week in Linux unless we have some strong opinions or decisions from Linus Torvalds. For example, this discussion we've talked about in the past regarding Bcache FS file system. We've just covered that in the last few weeks, last maybe couple months, when they had those big decisions of what are they going to do with the file system. Well, this week, though, we have a couple of crazy items on the docket. The first article linked in the show notes is about a completely crazy Rust format checking. Now, this has to do with how the Rust code submission was formatted. So I'm just going to read what Linus had to say. He says, notice how there are multiple sub areas, alloc, DMA, / scatterlist, DRM, and Rust. But it's all just random jumble because you've apparently pasted it into your editor or MUA or whatever and dropped the indentation process or something. What kind of broken editor are you using? I'm not trying to start an Emacs or VI war here, but you seem to be using something truly broken. Edlin? Now, for those that don't know, Edlin is the line text editor that was found on early versions of PC-DOS and MS-DOS. That's me saying that, not Linus. Back to Linus. Look again, no logic, and you've completely corrupted any multi-level indentation that presumably existed at some point, judging by the organization. WTH. That's what the heck?
Yes.
Please make the explanations readable and not just a random jumble of words. And in the article, Linus goes on to a second enthusiastic opinion on some of the style guide formatting for Rust. I'll let the listener take a look at the article in the show notes for full details, but the short synopsis is he has problems with the formatting small items. And this is specific to Rust, specifically multiple use of crate, : XYZ, semicolon statements, which he said there's several of them in there, but he thought it was better to turn it into use space crate, : open curly brace, XYZ, comma, and then a new line, ABC, comma, new line, and then closing curly brace, semicolon. So instead of having all the different statements, just the use crate, each line, use crate, use crate, use crate, you just use one use crate, and then you list all of them of your uses. And he says he thought that's much better. And he looked at the style guide, and then he used the Rust format check program, and it seemed to disagree in this case. And Linus says the Rust format check is wrong because it tried to condense everything into one line, and he did not like that at all. But like I said, check out the article for all the nuances of that issue, because he goes into quite a bit of where he looked and he checked and back and forth of what should or shouldn't be correct. And he's not happy with the Rust particular formatting thoughts in that case. He says they conflict. But there's a second article which Linus has a strong opinion of, and dealing with the RISC-V chips and the Endian format. So just so people know, chips are either big or little Endian format, which means if you have a value such as 1234, so 1234, big Endian would have 1, which is in the thousandths place, or the largest part of the number, stored in memory position 0, and the 2 for in the hundreds place would be stored in memory position 1, and so on. Little Endian flips that and goes in the case of 1234, the 4, which is in the ones position, is stored in memory position 0, with 3, which is in the tens position, going into position 1, and so on. And just so everybody's aware, the x86 CPUs are little Endian. Now, from what I can see, that decision was based on the very first chips Intel made and having the smallest value in the lowest memory position made for easier math. It made the carries easier and things like that. That's what most people speculate. There wasn't a real definitive answer, but keep in mind, we're talking about how 40 to 50-year-old chips work. This is predating the x86. It was like an 8080 or something like that, or it was even something I think maybe before that. So we're talking, I think it was like 8-bit chips kind of thing. That were, where this is in the 70s. And, things weren't as refined as they are now. But going back to the article, here's what Linus had to say about the Endian issue today. He said, and I quote, "Oh Christ, is somebody seriously working on BE support in 2025? That's big Endian. Why? Seriously, that sounds just stupid." And I'm putting a enthusiastic emphasis on the words he highlighted in here. Is there some real reason for this, or is it more of a RISC-V is used in academic design classes, so people just want to do Endianness for academic reasons? Because I'd be more than happy to draw the line in the sand and say new Endianness problems are somebody else's problem, and tell people to stop being silly. Let's not complicate things for no good reason, and there is no reason to add new Endianness. RISC-V or RISC-V is enough of a mess without the millions of silly configuration issues already. Don't make it worse. Tell people to talk to their therapists instead. That's much more productive. Now, later on, Linus also further added, "Okay, I just Googled this and I'm putting my foot down." All caps yelling, "We are not preemptively supporting big Endian on RISC-V." The documented reasoning for that craziness is too stupid for words, but since riscv.org did put it in words, I'll quote those words here. "There are still applications where the way data is stored matters, such as the protocols that move data across the internet, which are defined as big Endian. So when a little Endian system needs to inspect or modify a network packet, it has to swap the big Endian values to little endian and back, a process that can take as many as 10 to 20 instructions on a RISC-V target, which doesn't implement the ZBB extension. In other words, it's suggesting that RISC-V adds a big endian mode due to A, internet protocols where byte swapping is not an issue, B, using some RISC-V implementation, don't do existing ZBB extension as an excuse. And he says, this is plain insanity. First off, even if byte swapping was a real cost for networking, it's not. The real costs tend to be in all the memory subsystems. Just implement the damn ZBB extension. And don't go, we're too incompetent to implement ZBB. So we're now asking that everybody else feel the pain of a much worse extension and fragmenting RISC-V further. I was hoping that this was some April Fool's joke, but the page is dated March 10th, 2025. Close, but not close enough. This is the kind of silly stuff that makes RISC-V look bad. Now, I trimmed out the rest of his comments and shortened that a little bit so that the segment didn't go too long, but then he goes into more details and continuing to say that no big endianness in the kernel. And basically, so most CPUs now, a big chunk of them are little endianness. Internet protocols are defined with big endianness. What he's saying is there's hardware that takes care of this. We've got special instructions that trigger hardware that automatically does it so fast, it's not an issue. So that's why he's saying what he's saying. There were big endian processors. The one that comes to the top of my mind is the old Motorola 68000 series was big endian, but x86 and a lot of them now are little, and that's just kind of what a lot of, it's not total, but a lot of silicon is kind of settled on that outside of network. But if you want to see all the full details, take a look at the article, both articles linked in the show notes. He goes into a little more detail, goes into some more reasoning, but that's kind of the highlight of it. So, Linus is just so exciting.
So what's really funny about this is both ARM and RISC-V can run in either endianness. They can run in either form. And really, that surprises me every time that I come across that fact. But you're right. We've almost completely come to a little endian world.
Yeah. And I actually looked why they settled on, I kind of did a little bit of research. I mean, not a ton, but I spent a while looking, and everything I could find was, it just makes the math better, especially back in the old days when chips were a lot simpler. It was a lot harder to do the carries and stuff when you didn't have all the registers and the built-in functions, and it just made the math easier. So that's kind of why it resulted in that.
Let's be honest. The reason why we use little endian is because the x86 uses little endian.
Well, but I'm saying that's why they picked it originally. I mean, there's probably some truth to that, but I think we're also we're pushing on the rope a little bit with that explanation. World? No, it's just like they could have used big endian, and we'd all be using big endian. And people would then argue that, well, it would have been slightly better if we had chosen little endian back in the day. You know what I mean? So I'm sure that, yes, when they wrote the x86 architecture, they chose little endian because it was slightly easy. But the reason that we all use little endian is because that's what x86 uses. And x86 totally ran the world for a couple of decades. Oh, yeah. And if the 68000 had taken over, we would have all been on big endian. I'm just saying originally 100%. Why the Intel picked it. And it was pre x86. Mm-hmm. They kind of just got in the habit of, here's the way we're doing it. And Intel kind of standardized on it. So therefore, we kind of standardized on it.
Yep.
And you had all that software already written for it?
Yeah. I mean, who wants to have to do bit swaps? Ugh. Not me.
I mean, a lot of that though was, I would even say it was the hardware. And a lot of times when you're doing silicon, there's a lot of times you're taking like, we'll say a 1-bit adder, and you just go, oh, I'm just going to copy that 8 times. I'm going to have an 8-bit chip. Well, oh, I want a 16-bit chip. Oh, we're going to copy it 16 times. Or I'm going to take that 8-bit and I'm just going to do it twice. So there's a lot of reuse stuff. When you start out with a new chip, you don't always, wow, we started with a clean slate. There's a lot of copy and paste going on, just because there's a lot of things like, oh, we got to talk to the memory modules. Oh, well, we already have it designed in this chip. We don't have to redo it from scratch. We can copy it over. So I could see why it would have on the x86 pre-x86 silicon in, there's layouts in there because it's just easy to copy and paste. Yep. And that's what everybody was used to. And
are the Snapdragon chips Little Indian or Big Indian?
They are ARM chips, and so therefore they can do both, but almost everyone runs them in Little Indian. ARM can technically Google? ARM can technically run either way. But I don't know of any major operator or even not major operating system that runs in Big Indian mode these days. Little Indian is taking over the world.
And a lot of it is realistically, it's kind of like driving on which side of the road you drive on. If that's kind of what the standard is, it doesn't really matter as long as everybody's doing it the same. So if you say, okay,
everybody's not doing it everywhere.
Yeah.
Well, but I mean, as long as x86 all says, okay, this is what we're going to do, doesn't matter. If they suddenly switch to a new processor and it had Big Indian, okay, it's at this point with the hardware and the software technology we have, I don't think it's even really an issue other than just keeping everything straight. It's not, oh, we're going to get more performance one way or the other.
So, Jonathan, as a developer, which is easier to develop for, Little Indian or Big Indian?
Little Indian, just because that's what everything uses. And it was just pointed out to me that this sounds like the word Indian, like as in a Native American or someone from India. No, we are saying Indian, pronounced exactly the same.
ENDIAN.
END, yes. And it's which end of the word is the smallest bit. And
it's late 8-bit Indian or 16-bit Indian or 64-bit Indian.
Yeah, there's a whole lot of different wrinkles to this. Thankfully, though, everyone has sort of come to agree on what our software is going to be written in. There is something that everyone has not come to agree on, and that is what you have to do to be able to write that software, particularly if you're talking about Android. And we've talked about this before, that Google has come down and said, every Android developer must be registered. Dang it. Android dev verification, that's what they're calling it. And there is an argument to be made here that it is a security feature, that you don't want just anyone to be able to distribute binaries for Android, because people do get malware through that. That is one of the leading ways that you get malware on Android, is by sideloading apps from sketchy sources. So I acknowledge that. I have, however, said that one of the reasons that I am on Android and not on iOS is because you don't have to do this dev verification on Android. On iOS, not only do you have to do the verification step, you also have to pay them $100 a year, I think, to be able to become one of their trusted developers. It's a huge pain. Well, Google has heard our collective anger, and they've put out some statements about what they're actually doing. And they are not stepping back from their verification process, but they are making it obvious that there are going to be free tiers of this. You do not have to pay to be able to generate APKs to put on your own Android devices, which was one of the things that really bothered me, and I think a lot of people, about what was coming. So the Android Developer Verifier is the new system component that's coming with Android 16. And phones must ensure that apps have package names and signing keys that have been registered with Google at the time of installation. And this is still going to make things difficult for F-Droid. I'm not sure what F-Droid is going to do, but there is going to be a free tier to be able to get into this so that you don't have to pay the yearly registration fee. And so I'm less salty about it now. I still think that there are problems here. And I really think this is not a great idea when Google is still in the middle of trying to figure out if they've got antitrust and anti-competitive problems in various countries. But it's not as bad as it could be. So, like, good for Google for not going completely evil. They've just gone a little bit evil on this one.
Diet evil.
Diet evil. Yeah, there you go. Diet evil.
I always say Austin Powers, we're just mini evil, diet evil, half the evil of normal evil,
That's
so the free tier would let you sideload on your own devices.
Yeah, so it's not clear exactly how this is going to work. But it should at least let you compile firmware and sideload on your own devices. The thing over with Apple is if you're not a paid developer, if you go to sideload, your install only lasts for, I think it's a week. It's like a week or a month. Because I've looked into doing this to get things like Kodi running on my iPad, and the process is just you go to the Kodi webpage and you like, how do I install this on an iPad? And the author there, you can just hear it in the way that it's written. The author goes, this is not going to be any fun, but here you go. These are the three. None of them are any good, but these are the three ways that you can make this happen. And it's like, you can jailbreak your iPad. You can pay Apple $100 a year to be a developer, or you can install a dev package every 7 days. And it's like, none of these are great options.
Well, at least Apple's not asking you to pay 30% of your profits to them.
I mean, if you make money through the Play Store, or through the App Store, that is how that works. It's just kind of insulting when you have to also pay money to publish a free app. It just stings a little bit. So anyway, we've talked about that with Android in the past, and I wanted to bring an update that it's not as bad as it sounded, although I'm still not super happy about it.
Well, I was just thinking, Wizardling says, how is this even going to stop malware? And I'm thinking, well, once they have all your information, you're going to be so bombarded with advertisements that nothing else is going to run.
You don't have to worry about malware because of the adware.
Yeah. So to Wizardling's question, from what I understand, there is actually something. There is a verification step to the verification, and so that may mean taking a picture, holding your ID card, or something along those lines. Proving that you are a real person, and it's unclear whether Google is going to be individually scanning APKs before it confirms them. But if your developer account is tied to it like an actual person, then as soon as they catch malware being published from that developer, they can just cut that out, delist that developer's account. And so it'll potentially help to some extent.
And just hope that the malicious developer doesn't steal your ID and use it for publishing with.
Well, yeah, that is of course what will be attempted. So Wizardling also goes on to say Google needs to put large, loud warnings against sideloading and then shut up when a user decides to sideload. I would agree with that, except what's actually happening here is users are not deciding to sideload. Users are seeing a malicious advert that says, your phone has malware, click here to fix it. And when you click, it downloads an APK. And then you try to fix your phone and it installs the malicious APK. Right. So it's like, you have to keep in mind, it's not people that know that they're sideloading that's the problem. It's grandma that has no clue what's going on, and it's just trying to click the buttons to make her phone behave.
I just want to make this call.
I just want to play Bejeweled. That's all she wants to do. She just wants to play Bejeweled. And it told her that she had to upgrade or lose access to Bejeweled in 15 days. Yeah.
Come on, grandma's running the Bitcoin through the gambling app. She's doubling down, and
I mean,
got to make that money.
Not my grandma.
Pinochle earnings aren't enough.
Oh, all right. Ken, let's talk about Alpine and what's up with this merged file system.
Well, this week we can thank Marius Nestor for writing about an announcement by the Alpine development team. They have decided to adopt a /user merged file system layout for future Alpine Linux releases. Now, what is a /user merged file system layout? It is where several traditional top-level directories are moved into their corresponding locations under the /user directory. You will see /bin, /sbin, /lib, /lib64, and if you're running Ubuntu 25.04, you'll even see a /lib32 be replaced by symbolic links to the user /bin, /user/sbin, /user/lib, and /user/lib64. For the Alpine Linux, it's going to be /lib, /bin, and /sbin that will be symbolic links to their /user counterparts in the future. According to the Alpine Linux devs, this will mean reduced packaging maintenance and the containerization of more distribution-provided data under /user. With the release of Alpine Linux 3.23, any new Alpine installations of this and future releases will be /user merged. Users will be able to upgrade from older releases to 3.23 without being forced to /user merge their systems or the /user merge causing breakage. However, from this point forward, users are encouraged to migrate existing installs. After Alpine Linux 3.22 is end of life, non/user merged systems will be considered officially unsupported. The following stable release, which is probably going to be either 3.26 or 3.27, will make the /user merge compulsory, and non-merged installations upgrading to it will break. Now, I have read that the /user merge setup is becoming the standard in most of the Linux ecosystem, and I even confirmed that, as I said, Ubuntu 25.04 that I'm running on is already using that. Now, Marius provides more details in his article, including a link to the announcement for those of you who want to take a deeper dive into this.
Yeah, so do you know why we have a bin and an S-bin?
One's for local binary applications that you may create yourself, and the S-bins for system binaries, correct?
No. So,
or is it because you couldn't fit it all in one partition?
That's exactly what it was. This goes back to the early days of Unix. And it was I've seen comments from one of the original creators, like Ken Ritchie or one of those guys about this. And of course, the community has come up with like all of these sort of backwards explanations as to what system binaries and other binaries. S-bin is obviously for your system binaries, and bin is for everything else. And they're just like, no. The root disks were not big enough to put all the binaries in, and so we had to come up with a second folder to put the other binaries in. And so I don't remember what the S stands for, whether they actually wanted it to stand for system or maybe it just was secondary binaries. But yeah, it's literally just because on the machines that they first started doing Unix on, the disks were not very big, and so they had to have a second place to put stuff.
Well, at least they didn't go with bin 2.
I mean,
not space big, but physically they were big. I knew a guy that worked at Control Data years ago talking about the discs were the size of dishwashers and just huge platters that you took in and out of the drive. And
now, this was disks or core memory?
Discs.
Would have been discs. Yeah. We're a little after the days of core memory. Although that's fun stuff too.
I do have an old computer book that I've kept that I got from one of my college professors. He was going to get rid of it. And I think it's out of the 60s or maybe in the 50s. And it talks about how you wind core memory and how to do it. And, really old stuff that is like, this is kind of cool.
One of the coolest YouTubers I've watched doing retro computing is Usagi Electric. And he's got an old Bendix G15, I think. And it has vacuum tubes in it. And it has a magnetic drum memory. And so the way the memory works is it is a drum that spins, and it's got multiple read and write heads across it. And it's got the same kind of magnetic medium like you would get, on a hard drive, also like what they put on cassette tapes. And as it spins, it's just constantly reading those values off and then writing them back onto it. And then if you're familiar with the old story about Hal the real programmer, like the last real program, I forget what that story is actually called, but it's let's see if I can find it real quick.
I know it was the title of a chapter from the book Hackers by Stephen Levy.
Hal the Real Programmer. Yeah. I don't know if Stephen Levy had it or if that was part of ESR's stuff. But Hal the Real Programmer. He worked on one of these Bendix G15s. It's like all of the crazy techniques that he had to make that, what was it, a blackjack program, I think, worked. Was on one of these magnetic drums. And so, it's fun to see these different guys that get a hold of their old retro computing hardware. And what's really fun is when they make it work, rebuild stuff and get things working again. I enjoy that quite a bit.
And did you actually have a separate disk operating system for these?
I mean, like something like a Bendix was before the time of having a disk operating system at all. You wrote machine code on paper punch tape, and you ran that into the machine.
Yeah, and I was going to say the old control data discs that I was talking about, the size of a dishwasher. So, 1 meter by 1 meter by maybe 1.5 meters for the actual drive assembly. I want to say I thought he said it was like 1K or 2K per disc or something like. I mean, it was something real small. And I can't remember how many discs you could stick in there, but it was really, that's the point of this stuff, is that your drives were so small that
we finally got back around to what we were actually talking about, the /bin/sbin split. All right. Well, we've got more news. Jeff has another Linus Torvalds story and the kernel, and we will talk about that in just a second.
Hey, everybody, it's Leo Laporte. Are you trying to keep up with the world of Microsoft? It's moving fast, but we have two of the best experts in the world, Paul Thurrott and Richard Campbell. They join me every Wednesday to talk about the latest from Microsoft on Windows Weekly. It's not a lot more than just Windows. I hope you'll listen to the show every Wednesday. Easy enough. Just subscribe in your favorite podcast client to Windows Weekly or visit our website at twit.tv/WW. Microsoft's moving fast, but there's a way to stay ahead. That's Windows Weekly every Wednesday on Twit.
Well, this week I have another set of two articles. I mean, you're getting a lot of value out of this show. I'm telling you what. And this actually even has Linus in it again. So the first article is Linus removing the bcache FS code from the kernel. This is for the 6.18 kernel. Now, this isn't a surprise. We knew it was happening. The only reason it wasn't removed in 6.17 was to allow users to be able to have a smoother transition over to the new file system, or get ready to use bcache FS as a DKMS module, which, I mean, other file systems such like ZFS, is used that way as well. So it's not unheard of to have a file system in the DKMS module. Now, the second article, which is kind of the meat of the story, is a blog from Kent Overstreet, who's the lead developer on bcache FS. talking about the change from in-tree to the DKMS module. Now, he first talks about what it would take to get the file system into your distribution. It's just going to be a make and a make install of the bcache fs-tools, and that'll install the kernel sources. And, but he does go on to say, for most people, it should be handled by your distribution maintainer. So this shouldn't have to be anything you'd worry about normally, unless you're doing like a Linux from scratch, or maybe a Gen 2 or something where you really got your fingers into it. But for most people, shouldn't even be an issue. Now, you can even use bcache fs as your root file system, as long as you have an intra RAM fs. Now, this is an initial RAM disk, and I found a couple different variations of what intra RAM fs stands for, but it basically it's a initial RAM disk, which it works like a normal file system, but lets the system load in the needed drivers and support modules. In this case, the module to read the bcache fs file system. And before everything really gets started, it's not uncommon. It's actually pretty common. So this intra RAM fs isn't an odd thing. It's the first bootstrap for the kernel, the root file system, any other device drivers, things like that you need to load in right away before you actually start hitting your actual root file system. So Kent does make sure to say that the in-kernel software is going to be aging. And so, not even talking about it being removed in 6.18, but if you stay on 6.17 a while, there's going to be no updates for it. So you should not rely on that, and you should be going with the module just to make sure you're getting the latest and greatest. Now, right now, to get the code, there are going to be two channels. There's going to be a nightly, which, as it sounds, it gets updated every day, but probably unstable as changes are added, and they, as they get rolled into the tree, they're going to need debugging, reliability testing. So this is the kind of constant rolling developer release, and they could even, on a nightly, you could wind up with a non-functioning system as well, because maybe all the code didn't go in right or something like that. So that's only for the active developers. Now, there's also going to be a release, which, as it sounds, is going to be updated slower and have much more stable code in it. Kent does go on to say, when they're able to remove the experimental flag from the project, they're going to add a third channel. And they're thinking this experimental flag is going to drop in a few months. It's not that far away, they're thinking, but when they do, then they'll have the stable channel, which, as it sounds, is going to be even slower moving and going to be the rock solid version of the file system. So bug fixes will come fairly quickly, but features will move slowly. So nothing gets added to the stable until it's really tested and make sure that it's not going to disrupt anything. So, the release is probably more of what you might have in Arch or something like that, or something with a little more cutting edge. And then the stable was going to be your like server type releases, where you want stability over everything else. Now, Kent says he has been working with distributions to have them provide packages for both of the channels. And he said the goal is to get the widest range of testers they can, so most people can get pounding on the file system. And so they want it to make it as solid as they can for the initial stable release. Now, that will also tie in, they have automated testing, which they have in place. And he feels they've got a lot of test cases covered, but he does mention the random human element is something they are wanting, the broader audience for. Those things that no one ever thought to try, except for that one sysadmin or user who just thought this would work better, or, the developers never thought to turn those dials to those particular settings. It's like, we never envisioned somebody would do that. Well, that's where the human element comes. The human element comes in. Mm-hmm. Now, Kent does go on to describe the support status in many different distributions. For example, like Debian Ubuntu, they're going to provide an external repository to so Kent and the Bcache FS team will provide an external repository to Debian and Ubuntu, so which has both channels. And he has a lot more detail in there, but like he mentions things like in the Debian world, the nightly build, they refer to it as a snapshot. Same code, just different vernacular. So there's a lot more detail in there. He goes over a lot of different distributions, how they're handled, some slight nuances with them, but I'll leave that for the listener to go look at the article in the show notes for all that. But I hit a lot of the basic highlights, and so you get a feel what's going on. And honestly, time will tell if Bcache FS is going to be the next big thing, or it'll be left to the historical archives. But time will tell. We'll wait and see.
Yeah, it kind of brings to mind that you really want to make sure that your grub ability to boot an old kernel is working the way that you expect it to. Just in case you go to boot and DKMS is not working quite right.
Yes,
I've run DKMS with the NVIDIA drivers on a machine, and one of the interesting things there was that it seemed like you would build the driver after the boot. Like you would boot into the kernel, then as part of the boot up process, that's when the driver would actually build. I'm trying to, like, that won't work for a if the driver that you're building is your root file system driver. Like there's a real chicken and egg problem here, and I'm trying to figure out how that's going to work.
Yeah, and for those people that are unsure, video cards have a kind of a basic mode they all can run at. There's kind of a default low level. We support this basic stuff. Mm-hmm. So you can even have graphics going on while you build your full driver and then jump into that. So you have all your full resolution and all the 3D and everything like that, where the file system
does not have a basic driver.
It does not. It's like a different language, and that file system is the translator. That's your Rosetta Stone to go, oh, I see what's on the drive here. But that's where that intra RAM FS comes in. So you kick off into that, then it loads that, it kind of has that built in, because you have a little section that you can, it's like a bootstrap that's not in Bcache FS, that it kind of says, oh, okay, we can load this, get this going. Okay, now we can understand the root drive, then it loads from there. So it's kind of the glue that holds it together. Yeah. And like I said, it's fairly common. I think actually CacheOS might have that, because I think I might see that come up when it first boots up some of the messages.
I think basically every Linux distro uses initramfs at this point. That has just become part of the very standard way to boot Linux.
And it makes it easy, right? Because no matter what file system, whatever you're doing, you kind of just, I got this weird hardware. Okay, yeah. We just handle it from the outset. Now we can just take off with the actual drive and,
Yep. Ken?
And with all of that going on, do you still have to, like with the Raspberry Pi and other ARM64, worry about the, I want to say tree?
When you say tree, which, I know what you're talking about. The device tree binaries.
Yeah.
Yeah. That is less of a thing, particularly on x86, because it uses, I can't remember the name of the technology at the moment, but basically the BIOS hands over to the booting kernel a kind of a chart of here's all of the hardware that we know about. And then the kernel picks that up. Whereas the device tree is more for when you don't have a really smart BIOS that's going to do that. So you kind of have to build in that ahead of time. Here's the hardware to expect.
And BIOS has been replaced by EFI.
It's still...
but you're still getting that handshake.
In my vernacular, EFI is just another kind of a BIOS. I know that may not technically be correct, but It's the firmware that runs on the system that helps boot everything up. I think
you could say it's kind of the same thing. It's just got a little more features and handles a few things differently, but the very high level function is the same.
And now if you want to run BCAS-FS, that function's been moved out of the kernel.
Well, it's out of tree. You still have to compile it into your kernel. It's not there. It's not there by default.
Fortunately, you can compile it in the kernel.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. You'll have
and
problems.
it's actually the way they've designed it. It's supposed to go in pretty easily.
ACPI, by the way, is the term that I was trying to come up with just then. ACPI is what desktops use. And some ARM machines, actually, if you see an ARM machine that's branded as server ready, ARM server ready, it actually uses ACPI to hand over I think it does use device tree as well, but it hands over like a device tree binary to the kernel as it boots and says, here's the hardware that you need to care about. I have wasted many hours of my life on ARM devices that do not have great Linux support, trying to get them to boot. And so I know way more about device tree than I ever wanted to.
Well, and I am assuming that if the BIOS, whatever format it is, has a device, it doesn't know what it is. It still has some kind of ID to it. And then when you boot up, you can have the OS go, oh, I understand what this is. And then it knows what driver or module or whatever it has to do to load into that intra RAM FS. So the next time you boot,
in other words,
totally
it's got
what's going on.
Generic driver that it can fall back to.
Well, it depends what the hardware is, whether it has a generic driver or not. But it would at least say, I recognize a device here, hands it to the operating system. When you boot up, the operating system then can go, oh, I need to patch my bootstrap to handle X device so it can load so that
it just has a lookup and it loads drivers. It goes, oh, I've got this piece of hardware that means I need to load this driver into memory. I've got this piece of hardware. I have something on the PCI bus has this, vendor and ID on it. Okay, I'm going to look that up in the table. Oh, here's the driver that needs to come up. And in some cases, here's the configuration info that needs to go to that driver. And because it's got that list.
And then on rare occasions, you come across, I don't recognize this at all.
Well, yeah. And that's when you'll have, you run LSPCI and you see something that's on there that's like, I don't know, something. There's something on your PCI Express bus, but we don't know what it is.
Or that's
hopefully FUPD can update your firmware to recognize it later.
Well, or sometimes you load the driver in and it knows what to look for. Mm-hmm. It's like, what is this? Oh, that's what I'm looking for. I'm the driver for that. And the driver takes over and handles it.
When you get into really sort of esoteric hardware, you have to load the module with configuration data. So like I've seen some modules that you have to give, I don't remember if it used environmental variables or what, but you would say, okay, load this module and pass these arguments to it when you load it. And so you sort of force it to look at this particular place for this particular bit of hardware. And then, your network card or whatever would come up and work. It's fun. Lots of fun.
And then you try to access certain video features through Vulkan.
I mean, that's a thing too. Before we get to, it is time for Vulkan. Yes. He's ahead of me. Ken is ahead of me by a step, or I tried to be ahead of him by a step and got too far ahead. Anyway, so there was this interesting story that I came across. It's a Phoronix story, but it is getting reported other places as well. And that is that Red Hat has been getting some information from NVIDIA for the NVK driver. And interestingly, some of these specifications, bits of information, are not available publicly, but Red Hat has signed an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement, with NVIDIA to get some of this data. And I thought that was really interesting that NVIDIA sort of went out of their way to go to Red Hat and say, okay, look, we want this stuff supported in the kernel, but we can't just. And so this is at some level, this is the way the conversation went. We want to give you this information, but for whatever reason, we can't just publicly release this document. But we want you to be able to look at this document and release source code based off of it. And so, there's likely some way that they clear when they write source code. Maybe they hand it back over to NVIDIA and say, make sure we didn't leak any of your secret sauce in this. Because essentially, when you have one of these NDAs, that's what it means, that there's some piece of information that's considered confidential. There's something in there that NVIDIA says this cannot be released publicly. And maybe it's because NDA designed this hardware while they were under an NDA with another company. And so, to not break their own NDA, they have to make sure that the person they're working with is also under NDA. And then they have their legal team that goes back and reviews the code and goes, okay, nothing that's protected under NDA is in here directly, this code is not going to directly violate the NDA. Therefore, it's good to go ahead and release out to the public. And I think for people that have not dealt with this stuff before, if you read this, it's going to seem really weird to you. This is fairly typical for doing hardware support. Particularly if you're not like just reverse engineering it. So in the past, that's one of the things that we've had engineers will do is they just reverse engineer. So that you do something like you can actually run programs like Wireshark and have them watch the PCI Express bus. And so that way you can reverse engineer, okay, this is the bytes that you need to push over the PCI Express bus to initialize the card. You go write the open source driver and you just push the same bytes and the card comes up and gets initialized. Well, so in this case, there's actually a document that says to bring up the Blackwell is the specific card that they're looking at. It's that generation. There's a document that says these are the bytes that you push to initialize a Blackwell card, and it's going to go into a lot more detail. Like there may be, if you want to bring it up in this mode, you use this byte. If you want to bring it in some other mode, you use this other byte. And like it may be that what exactly those modes are and what they do are part of what's protected under the NDA. But the engineers working on it can go, we don't care about any of that. We just want to bring it up as a desktop card. This is the byte sequence that we want to send it. And then NVIDIA looks at it and goes, oh yeah, fine. You can release that byte sequence out to the public under an open source license. We don't care. And so there's just this kind of, it's going to be between these two teams, this constant going back and forth of, okay, here's the part that we need. Can we open this to the public? And then there may be pushback on it. Yes, you can, but you have to get rid of this comment because it gives too much away. Or, yeah, that's fine. Release that. It's not. It is a pain. It's work, but it's not terribly surprising. And there's no grand conspiracy going on here that it's under NDA. So, in my opinion, good for both of them, for both Red Hat and NVIDIA, for being willing to do the work and get these drivers working for everybody. I think it's a great thing.
Yeah, and you can also possibly, like, if AMD saw some of this, they could maybe determine some hardware, secrets, then
right.
It's not even counting. NVIDIA said also that they've had other third-party licenses that they've used that they built in their driver, and then you can't. I mean,
they don't own the code, so they can't open source the code.
Right.
Yeah,
and
because
it gets really weird when you. It gets weird when you have
to a chip that somebody else might have created.
No, they're like a piece of technology, like video decode. There's probably part of the code in there that's video decode. Well, that thing, video decode, is one of the worst. Video decode is the worst. So it's covered by patents. It's covered by licenses, all kinds of stuff. And so they sign an agreement that says you get to use this, but you don't own the code, and here are all the rules that it's under.
See, and it gets really weird when you do this because, and I've been party to this personally.
I figured you would have.
So, okay, Ken, you make a video decode that's like really awesome. Jonathan's like NVIDIA and he licenses that, and I'm Red Hat.
Yeah.
Well, Jonathan can release information to me, but it can't contain anything about your decoder. Even if I, Red Hat, say, oh, hey, I'm going to have an agreement with you, Ken, so you can share what you can share your information with me. We've got an NDA. Jonathan still cannot release anything on that to me, because we don't have a 3-way NDA. Even though you say, well, everybody's got an NDA, not as like a group. So I can talk to you about your decoder, Ken. I can't say anything what Jonathan's telling me. And I can talk to Jonathan about his hardware, but I can say nothing about what we've talked about your stuff, Ken. It gets really weird and funky.
It depends upon the exact wording of the NDA, because some of them do have clauses that say you can share this information with contractors to be able to do X, Y, or Z. And so then you have a lot more liberty to be able to make that sort of thing work.
And if you want this clause to go into effect, give me a little bit more money.
Usually
you got to get past the lawyers, which is just, that's a train wreck in and of itself. Once legal's involved, nothing goes anywhere. but no, even with the clause, you can maybe to contractors, but you cannot talk about a separate entity. So for all of us, for like Jonathan and I to talk to each other about what your stuff is, Ken, we have to have an agreement where all three of us have signed an NDA between all of us, not just, one between me and you and, it doesn't work that way. It turns into nightmare, because when you have three companies together and you can't I can't tell you what they said. You got to ask them what this is, because I can't tell you. And a 3-way NDA can be brutal to get.
None of this is legal advice. If you're in one of these situations, go get your own business lawyer and do what they tell you to do. Do not rely upon us for legal advice, because none of us are lawyers.
Yeah. Other than, just don't tell anybody anything. It's just
I can think of one prime example of how this is messing up a certain over-the-air broadcast system that we've talked about in the past that's starting to come out. ATSC3.
Oh, well, again, audio and video codecs are just the worst, because they've got patents and they've got software licenses. Oh.
And I think you've probably, did you have a HD home run that handles the new ATSC3 yet?
I don't know if it does or not. I've been doing so much streaming. I've watched very little over-the-air broadcasting for years now.
I don't, and there's basically nobody around that really has it. I think there might be one station.
HD Home Run Connect 4K, and I've got it set up so I can use Plex to record the over-the-air broadcasts that are still in ATSC1. I can watch some of the ATSC3 on newer TV that I got through my sound bar. For the audio.
That's the
But I was sitting up an older TV, and it kept coming back with an error message saying, this hardware doesn't support this.
I don't know what this fancy audio codec is.
Hey, Ken, maybe if you used curl, that would work.
Maybe, as long as it's not also having any AI slop being thrown in.
So these two yahoos are trying to tease the next story, which is the curl project and its stance on AI. We're going to let Ken cover that.
And yes, we're actually seeing where there may be some opinions changing, because this week, Thomas Claiborne wrote about the exception to the AI slop rule for the register. According to Thomas, over the past 2 years, the open source curl project has been flooded with bogus bug reports generated by AI models. I keep wanting to say ow for some reason. This has been a problem for other projects, including the Python community, Open Collective, and the Mesa project. The problem isn't that AI generates the misinformation, but rather, like with phishing scams, people are not doing due diligence and vetting the information either due to a lack of training or time before submitting it. Last month, the curl project received dozens of potential issues from Joshua Rogers, a security researcher based in Poland. Rogers identified assorted bugs and vulnerabilities vulnerabilities with the help of various AI scanning tools, and his reports were not only valid, but appreciated. In fact, last month, Daniel Steinberg posted, actually, truly awesome findings. Last week, Daniel Steinberg said in his mailing list update, "We have now at last gone through the entire list, and as I write this, we have given credit to Joshua's list of issues for no less than 49 commits or bug fixes merged in curl's Git repository. Of course, most of them were tiny mistakes and nits in ordinary static code analyzer style, but they were still mistakes that we are better off having addressed. Several of the found issues were quite impressive findings. Just 16 days since the previous curl release, and we have already merged 133 bug fixes." Now, I'm going to let you read Thomas's article to find out Daniel and Thomas's opinion on AI tools, as well as which tools Joshua used.
Yeah, I love the comment on the Mastodon thread. Somebody, Wolf480PL says, "So this is what AI can do when wielded by a competent human." Steinberg says, "Yes, absolutely."
And it just goes to prove the weakest link in any chain
is the human. No, I mean, this is what we found too in the projects I work on. You know, my lead firmware dev uses like Copilot all the time for dumb refactoring things, right? Like, oh, hey, all of this code is in one file and it's 5,000 lines of code. Hey, Copilot, split this up into 5 different files so that it's easier to read. Copilot can do that reasonably well. It's when I closed a pull request just the other day that somebody's like, "I use Copilot to do these 5 different things. And oh, by the way, we also changed the name of the project. Pull my code in." Go away. If you really want to do this, break it up into individual PRs and don't try to rename the project.
Time to fork it if you're going to rename it.
Well, I mean, sure, if somebody wants to. It's like your AI is showing. I shouldn't. When I read a pull request or a bug report, if it's obviously written by AI, then it's probably not going to go anywhere. You need to have done at least a little bit. I like what Mesa says about this. We don't care if AI wrote it, but you need to understand it. And it's obvious that is not the case in a lot of these PRs and bug reports and security reports, etc. But I really, it's a personal problem. It really is.
No, I was going to say it's a personal pet peeve of mine. The people that use AI and don't really understand what they're saying and try to, well, AI told me this. Well, AI is wrong. You know, this is just not how this works. It drives me nuts.
It kind of reminds me of that old saying about how that sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And we're at the point now to where some normal people think that AI is magic, but then like those of us that actually write code for a living, we look at it, the results of it and go, no, definitely not magical. Your AI is not magical. It's just wrong.
Yeah. If it was, it could make that work even the way it was written.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, too, is whenever you truly use AI, like professional AI, there's an art to actually writing the prompt. It's not just, hey, just do this for me.
Yes.
No, you're going to have, I want this in this language, in this format, and do it this certain way, and use this. And, there's a lot of...
I've talked to some people that know what they're doing. So Randall Schwartz. I've had a couple of shows with Floss Weekly with him on it. We've talked about this. And he's come up with a flow. And he will actually have the AI write the prompt for itself. And I believe that's useful because he has a conversation with the tool about what exactly he wants done. And he corrects it when it's making... And essentially what he's having it do is write the spec for the changes it's going to make. And so he actually describes it as though he's treating the AI tool as if it's a junior developer. A very zealous, but oftentimes wrong junior developer. And so his initial, he will give it a very brief scope of work and say, turn this into an actual scope of work. And then he looks at the scope, you need more detail here, or, this is the wrong approach here, and actually flesh that out to where you've got a scope of work with details on it that you can then check. And then you have the AI take that scope of work and actually implement it. And so you give it a lot of guardrails, and you're checking it as you go along to make sure that it's not making dumb mistakes as it's planning things out. And he's had reasonably good success with, in the end, getting the AI to write working programs. But his take on it is, it's like, I've got to be the senior developer, and it is the very junior developer, and I get to hold its hand as we're doing things. But if you treat it like that, you can get good results out of it.
I sometimes look at it like a genie or a deal with the devil, where, okay, you better specify everything, because whatever little loophole you left, it's going to do it to try to mess things up. At work, I use it quite a bit, and I've had a lot of training too on here's what you write, here's what you don't write, here's scope this, now constrain it here, you know.
Because remember, with all those stories about genies, they invariably end up with a genie doing something malicious to you.
Run amok. Yes, genies run amok.
So you have to write your prompt kind of, okay, it's in this box and they can't get out.
Yeah. Good luck. All right. Up next, Jeff is going to talk about something completely non-controversial, System D, and tell us something.
Is this after the break?
Yes. This is coming right after this.
Hey, everybody. Leo Laporte here, and I'm going to bug you one more time to join Club TWiT. If you're not already a member, I want to encourage you to support what we do here at TWiT. 25% of our operating costs comes from membership in the club. That's a huge portion, and it's growing all the time. That means we can do more. We can have more fun. You get a lot of benefits, ad-free versions of all the shows. You get access to the Club TWiT Discord and special programming like the keynotes from Apple and Google and Microsoft and others that we don't stream otherwise in public. Please join the club. If you haven't done it yet, we'd love to have you. Find out more at twit.tv/clubtwit. And thank you so much.
System D has been talked about from time to time on the show. And most of the time we talk about how System D isn't in some new distribution because they're either going with some previous system int or a different solution altogether. It's been rather controversial, but it's been around for quite a while now. And most distributions use it, but some people still are fighting it. And if you don't know, System D is the core chunk of software that, is kind of the initial starting point for user space. It provides a system and service manager and runs as process ID number one and kind of starts the rest of the system. There's a lot of other things it does, but suffice to say, it's very core to a Linux system, and changing it out is not a trivial task. I mean, yes, it can be done, but it isn't like just loading in a different application. System D is plumbed in at very low levels. So to change out of System D, it's a very large undertaking. Now, I bring this up because the latest version of System D was released, version 258, and it has some changes that are going to affect what kind of computer system can support the software. The biggest is the removal of the C group V1. Now, this means legacy and hybrid hierarchies have been removed. It requires the features in C group version 2. Now, the original C group version 1 was put into the kernel in 2007 with kernel 2.6.2. Version 2 didn't show up until 2016 with Linux kernel 4.5. Now, that sounds good, but there's another change which now also says the minimum kernel version that System D will support is 5.4, which was released in 2019, and kernel 5.7 is the actual recommended version. So this means that older kernels are not going to run with System D 258. Now, just to be 100% clear, the C groups that we're talking about, these are inside the kernel. This is not talking about the CPU levels, which we sometimes talk about when we say, oh, this is version 1, version 2, version 3 of the instructions supported by the CPU. That is not what we're talking about. So hardware is not limited directly by this upgrade. just by the kernel version, which can run on the hardware. So if kernel version 5.4 can't run on your hardware, then you can't run the new systemd or the distribution using it. Now, along with that support for System V style init scripts is officially deprecated, and it's totally scheduled for removal in systemd 259. The same goes for the legacy run/lock directory and for IP table support in network D and nspawn, which will now it's going to solely rely on NF tables for the next release. There are security changes going in as well, such as OpenSSLs become the only supported backend for systemd-resolved and systemd-importd. They're dropping support for both GNU TLS and libgcrypt. So there's a lot more things going into 258 and what's going to be standard in 259. So take a look at the article linked in the show notes for the full list of changes and a link to the GitHub changelog, which will have every single change in there. So happy booting.
Yeah. I have trouble being too mad at systemd because almost everything in it works really well. The only part of systemd that I really hate is when it takes over DNS. Just drives me nuts.
Yeah, I mean,
so you don't have any problems with the way it's does your keyboard handling?
It doesn't do keyboard handling on my machines. I don't know.
Because I was seeing in the full release notes that it was talking about working around limitation of X11's keyboard handling, systemd's keyboard mapping hardware database. And one of those has to do with mapping the microphone mute and the touchpad on-off toggle keys to the function keys F20, F21, F22, and F23 instead of the correct key codes.
Looks like it's time to get off X11.
I mean, yeah.
One more reason.
Something you have to remember, though, is like there are parts of systemd that the vast majority of distros don't use, because it's not written for normal distros to use. Some parts of systemd are written specifically for immutable Linux. Some parts of it are, written explicitly for something even more locked down than that, like a real kiosk mode or something. So not everything that's in there, not everything that you see in the notes is something that's actually going to affect your machine. There's just a couple of pieces of systemd that additional pieces that I wish fell into that, and the DNS handling is one of them. I want my old DNS system back. It's not annoyed me enough that I've gone and done it on any of my machines, because I know it's possible to go back to the old resolve /etc/resolve.conf rather than, I forget what resolve D, I think, is what they call it when you let systemd be your DNS resolver. It's not annoyed me enough to go do it yet, but there's been a couple times I've been pretty close.
And another one I noticed has to do with the journal CTL, the -- follow flag. Now exits with success on a sigterm or sigint, and when the pipe it is writing to is disconnected.
I use that follow quite a bit, actually, in debugging stuff. So I probably don't care what it exits with most of the time. That sounds like that would be sort of a scripting thing. But interesting.
I don't know. I just know originally it caused a lot of controversy, but it kind of won the standards war. That's what we got now. Until somebody makes something better.
I mean, there's a few distros still hanging around that are not systemd, and that's sort of their headline feature. But man, pretty much all of the big ones, all of the standard ones use systemd, and it just works for them.
Yeah, and the thing is, I don't know enough about it. I don't get into systemd enough, and realistically, people have arguments. I've read some of them, but at least my experience on the hardware side, I listen to forum stuff, people talking, and like 75% have no clue. Then of that, you have about 20% that have a clue, but they kind of miss points. They kind of get it wrong. And you got like 5% that actually really understand what's going on. So anymore, I just kind of assume every controversial thing of whether, X11 versus Wayland or System D versus some other init system or file system X versus file system Y. It's like, most people don't get deep enough into the weeds.
Well,
the technological enough to.
I really suspect that, like, at least in the early days of System D, why a lot of people didn't like it is because all of the institutional knowledge was for sysv init. And so you would go to Google a problem and, or you'd ask a buddy about the answer to a problem, and the answer would be, there for a while at least, it was the sysv answer. Well, go look at your sysv init script, and here's what you change in the script. Or here's a sysv init script to make this thing work. And when the world went System D, it's like none of that stuff worked. And so there was a time period, probably a couple of years there, where it was difficult to find the answer to these questions because there just wasn't that body of knowledge about how to fix things under System D. We've been at it enough now, though, that like you can find it, and you find now on Stack Overflow, well, here's how you do that weird thing that you want to do inside of System D. So everybody's kind of happy once again.
Yeah, well, and I'm just even referring to some of the. Well, technically, or to the technical reason for doing this is not good enough compared to this other reason, and I don't know.
Yep.
But what's really interesting, looking through the release notes, is what's going to the minimum version that's going to be required as of version 259.
What is the minimum version in there?
For Linux kernel, it's got to be 5.10 or greater, and they're recommending 5.14.
That's not terribly new.
No, but we're looking at a lot of Linux is getting rid of 32-bit. They're looking at going to V3. We're getting the point. There's a lot of different parts of the whole Linux distribution that are kind of just saying, we're going to start dropping some of this old hardware.
Yeah.
And if you work with Python, then it's going to be a version 3.9.0 or better. And what's the latest version now?
It's like
3.13, I think. I
was going to say 13 or 14. Yeah. Let's see. I'm sure we can find out. Latest Python release.
Because I know I've got to find time to do an update to my Octopi.
The Python 3.14 is slated to come out this upcoming week. So on the 7th. So there you go. I was thinking 3.13 or 3.14, and we are right there in between the two.
So we may have a story next week about that.
Somebody might bring it. There's another release that just happened that's got something pretty cool in it that I'm excited about, and that is Wine just did the 10.16 release, and it landed officially, finally, in mainstream Wine support for NT Sync. And that is the synchronization code that originated in the Windows NT kernel. And the way that Linux has done synchronization, this synchronization primitive has been very different for years and years. And people said, why don't we just add a primitive, a new system call to the Linux kernel that lets us do this sync like Windows does? It took a while to convince everybody that that was a good idea, but we are now there. Most of our Linux kernels run this, and it is now officially in Wine with version 10.16. And so it will take a bit for this upstream code to land in places like Proton, as well as Glorious Egg Roll and all of those. But there are ways that you can go ahead and try this out if you would like to. It's been in Wine staging for a bit. I'm actually pretty impressed how quickly, now that things have landed other places, how quickly this came to Wine. And they were able to get it mainlined inside of Wine. There's a couple of other interesting things in 10.16. 16-bit apps are supported in the new WoW 64 mode, which that's Wine on Windows on. I know WoW 64 used to stand for Windows on Windows 64. I'm not sure what it stands for in the Wine context. Maybe the same thing, but it's 64-bit Wine essentially. But it's really interesting because you can't run 16-bit apps on a 64-bit Windows install. So like on Windows 11 right now, if you're running a 64-bit, which I think basically all of the Windows 11 installs are 64-bit now, you can't run 16-bit apps, but you can now in Wine, in WoW 64, so the 64-bit versions of Wine. It supports 64-bit, it supports 32-bit, and it now also supports 16-bit, which is really pretty interesting. It's doing what Windows never could. And then one other thing that really is potentially important in there is support for the D3D KMT objects. And I went and I looked that up, and that is basically kernel calls where a program can talk directly to the 3D driver. It's for things like perhaps changing the screen resolution or other things of that nature. And I'm sure there are some games over the years, games and other programs that have used that. And so good on them for adding support for all of those things. So Wine 1016, it looks like it might be a pretty good one, a pretty impressive release of Wine. And again, it'll be pretty cool when Proton and the rest of them use that or a newer version for the upstream.
I bet it won't take too long, because if it's been in staging, a lot of times, I think, doesn't Glorious at least grab a lot of that staging?
Yeah, I think that is essentially what the Glorious Eggroll build is it's Proton rebased on top of Wine staging, I think. And so, in fact, there's a GE Proton 1017 just released. Let's see. Trying to see if I can tell which Wine version that's based on. I don't see it. But yeah, it won't be long before you can get it in at least Glorious Eggroll.
I'll see if I can find it.
Yeah, it's definitely out there. Or if it's not, it will be soon. So,
but if you play Wolfenstein: The Old Blood, looks like they fixed an issue where it failed to start with EGL open GL backend.
Yeah, there's a bunch of fixes that land in every version of Wine for various different things. I saw that one. There's things where they fixed flickering. Grand Theft Auto Vice City, the intros were playing with a black screen, and they got that fixed. SimCity 2000 doesn't launch in WoW 64 mode. You can get your SimCity 2000 fixed now. All kinds of fun stuff in there if you go look through them all.
I don't know what version this specifically is, but Glorious Eggroll Proton 1016, which was released 2 weeks ago, they said Wine updated to the latest bleeding edge.
Right.
I don't know what that means.
That probably would have been the version before this.
10.15?
Yeah, I think so.
Because the odds, the bleeding edge,
I don't.
And the evens, the stable version, isn't it?
No,
it's the other way around.
It's a little different from that. I don't remember. Wine has their own sort of special formula for which one is stable and which one is not. Maybe it is that the odds are the stable ones or the evens. I don't remember. You're right. No, they have their own. It's a kind of a weird thing.
No, Wine, you have like the stable, you have the testing, then you have the staging, or maybe it's development, and they don't go off numbers as much as you have three different channels.
Yeah, so stable is 10.0 and development is 10.16. That's what it is. So it's the .0 is the stable. And so it's possible that they'll do like a 10.0.1 at some point. But when they're ready to mint another stable, it'll be 11.0. I knew it was different. I knew it was different than what basically everybody else does. Oh, well.
Yeah, I'm not seeing the...
We can look into that after the show. We got one more story that we're going to cover, though. That is Ken talking about the Linux Foundation and something new there.
Yeah. We've got this George Whitaker writing this week about the Linux Foundation contributing Newton as a fully open, community-governed project. Now, according to George, Newton is a next generation GPU accelerated physics simulation engine designed specifically for roboticists. Try saying that one 3 times fast. And simulation researchers who want high fidelity, performance, and extensibility. Now, according to the GitHub organization for Newton, the project is governed under the Linux Foundation, is community built, and is licensed under Apache 2.0. The repository README describes it as aiming to supersede warp.sim with a more general open architecture. If you're asking what warp.sim is, it's the module that was used before Newton. Newton benefits from neutral governance, community oversight, and long-term sustainability by being housed under the Linux Foundation. George also writes about Newton's technical highlights and capabilities, use cases, and challenges, which I'll leave for you to read about.
Yeah, interesting. So this is what, for people that are designing robots, actually building physical robots to be able to simulate them?
After they've done a simulation to see how everything's going to work in the physical world.
Yeah.
I just hope Newton never meets Al, or is it AI?
It's funny. So on Hackaday, one of our writers, his name is Al. It's Al Williams, and it's always you always have to do a double take because of the font we use. The L and the I is the lowercase L and the uppercase I are written the exact same, and so this article brought to you by AI. Oh no, it's just Al all the time.
Let's just start calling AI Al.
I mean, we do tease him about that from time to time. It's a lot of fun.
But is this the beginning of the end?
I doubt it.
If you're a Terminator fan, yeah, it might be.
Nah. I've seen the videos of what robots and AI can do, and it's still not entirely inspiring when they meet the real world.
So 100 years down the road, hopefully.
Maybe. We'll see. We will see. All right. That's our news story, is that we've got some fun command line tips. I'm actually going to lead off with something also related to the Raspberry Pi, the 5, the 500, and the 500 Plus, and we will cover that right after this. All right, so this week I was in a position where I was shipped the Raspberry Pi 500 Plus, and it came with Debian 12, Raspberry Pi OS 12, based on Debian 12. Came with 12 on it, and then about the time that it showed up, the announcement came out that 13 was out, and I said to myself, how am I going to put 13 on this? I really don't want to open the thing up. I mean, they give you a spudger, that's the plastic tool to open the case, and it is now considered to be user openable. You're not voiding your warranty. I don't think you did on the previous ones, but you're not voiding your warranty to open up the 500 Plus. You can get in there and do stuff, which you have to be able to get to the NVMe. But still, I was thinking through this, going, man, this does not sound like any fun. If only there was an easier way to install the new version. And then I remembered that I saw something about this. So I went and looked, and the Pi 5, the Pi 500, and the Pi 500 Plus, so basically the 5th generation Pi, and probably newer, I think this is something that's going to stick around, has the Raspberry Pi imager built into the device firmware. And you can access it by turning the machine off, making sure you have an Ethernet cable plugged in, and then holding the shift button on the keyboard while you plug it back in and turn it on. When you do that, it's going to boot up to what looks exactly like the Raspberry Pi imager that you'd run on your desktop. And it gives you the options to, choose your platform, choose your, which distro you want, choose your heart, the what media storage you want to put this on. You can go through and you can customize it with username and password. Whether you want SSH turned on, all of that stuff that you're used to from the Raspberry Pi imager. And you can just say go, and it will download the whatever image you tell it to and put it right onto that machine's SD card or NVMe card. I think it probably would do USB as well. And then we'll automatically reboot and bring you up into whatever system that you wanted to use. And I was really, really impressed by that. Particularly the Pi 500 Plus with the NVMe inside of it, it was really useful because I didn't want to have to take the thing apart. I just want to be able to use it. And so hold the shift key, boot it up, and then you're right there in the Raspberry Pi imager, and it is ready to go. So quite the nifty little feature set.
Very cool. I've got an easier way to update my SD card.
If you're on a Pi 5 or newer, yes.
Yeah, the Raspberry Pi 5 I have. Mm-hmm. It's a shame the Octopi is not on a Raspberry Pi 5. Maybe I need to move it to that.
Maybe buy another one. Buy a Pi 500 and use that for it.
Buy a Pi 500 Plus and delegate that one to the Raspberry Pi.
Yeah, there you go.
Or Octopi.
That is the way to do it. All right, Jeff, what is image?
Image. Well, all right, this is going to be a little different command line tip and not less of a command line and more of a useful program tip. Now, this really stuck in my head because I first heard about this from a programmer at work. You know, he and I were chatting, you know, doing the water cooler talking, and we were going over Linux things, and you know, I talking about various things, and I said, "Oh, I used Plex in the past to host images for the family, you know, like photographs and stuff, but you know, it's kind of a clunky interface and doesn't do it very well. I needed to find something better." He told me about this program, Image, IMMICH, and it's one he uses and swears by. So he's all into on this. And then I just happened, you know, what was my command line for the tip? And I just saw this came up and it hit stable release at 2.0. And I thought, you know, this might be a good time to pass it along. And Image is a self-hosted photo and video management solution. So this is for when you don't want to pay, you know, the Googles and, you know, Amazons and whatever to host, and so you can share your files. You just want to do it all yourself. Now, one possible downside, you know, is there's not a desktop app for displaying the pictures, as it was more designed for phones. But now there is a web app, so it's not like desktop users are totally out in the cold. It's just if you prefer a standalone app versus the web, you know, you depending on your proclivities, that may or may not be a deal breaker. But for me, I'm okay with a web view. Now, I'm not going to go into detail on how you install it, because here's another little bump in the road: is you run it in a Docker container or Portainer, or use something like Unraid or TrueNAS Scale to actually run it. So it's designed to be containerized from the get-go. It's not just a regular program that you just load up. Now they do have different, you know, they have all those listed out, so you can run it in whatever you can download the package to get it in your Docker container or whatever you're going to use. And they also, for like mobile apps, they have the app which is in the Play Store, the Apple Store. You can get it on F-Droid, or you can just download the APK and run it wherever you choose to. And if you're curious about everything it can do, rather than go into tons of features, if you look at the documentation page on the website linked in the show notes, there's actually a comparison page, so you can view what it does and doesn't support along with other similar programs. And they give a rating on how well they feel a particular program supports the feature. So, you know, yeah, maybe it has this feature that, you know, Image doesn't have, but you look at it and goes, well, they don't do a good job of it. Or maybe it's really good, but it also lacks a feature that Image has, and then you can make a educated decision. But take a look at the article linked in the show notes. It goes into more detail, and you know, even talks about future plans, so that you can see where the program is going to go into the future. And if you want to get a self-hosted program, and like I said, you want to get out from under paying big tech for hosting your media, you know, definitely check it out. And, let me know what you think. I personally haven't used it yet. I've never set up a Docker container. I guess it's maybe time I learned. But like I said, a couple of programmers I know at work swear by it. So take a look and let me know what you think.
Yeah, this has actually some really cool stuff in it. I have to make a note to my scheduler that we need to talk to these guys on Plus Weekly.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot in there. So I didn't want to really go through all here's the 300 things it does, but it's pretty powerful.
Yeah.
Does it support the DLNA standards so that you could, if you've got an DLNA compliant device, that you could use it to stream from?
I don't believe it does.
I know it will. They talked about streaming to Chromecast. So it's got some of that. I don't know if DLNA is one of them, but that is a great question to ask them if we have them on the show. So we will try to do that.
Let me know a couple of weeks in advance, and maybe I could arrange a day of vacation or two to get on that one.
Yeah, it'd be fun.
If I still have vacation left by then.
And it looks like, if I can see by the Discord, Jonathan's wife's already looking into it. So
yes, we'll try to get him on the show. It'd be fun. We get a lot of fun.
Research ongoing.
Yes. All right, Ken, you ready to talk about more wire plumber configuration stuff?
I'm going to talk about troubleshooting wire plumber configurations. In fact, let me go ahead and bring up my terminals. I've got 3 of them today to demonstrate the command that I'm going to be covering that, as I said, may help you troubleshoot your pipe wire and wire plumber systems. It is wpctl space sit-log-level. Now, instead of diving deeply into debug logging, which I've got a link to if you really want to look into this some more, I'm just going to demonstrate how you can set the log level for a particular client device, sync, source, filter, or stream so that you can log fatal errors, informational message, debug messages, or even traces. For those of y'all watching or listening, I've got 3 terminals up. On your top left is one that I've got the journal CTL space -- user space -b space -f, which I think sometimes is referred to as -- follow. Correct, Jonathan?
Yep. Sometimes you want to use follow rather than -f, particularly if you're going to then right away specify the unit, because that's -u, and -fu just doesn't always look right, particularly when you're telling people to use it.
Yeah. But then I'm piping that into grep so I can look for either pipe wire or wire plumber. I'm going to go ahead and start that. And with starting that, there's nothing coming out because I don't have any log level set. So let's go ahead and bring up the terminal right below where I'm going to type in. And make sure I got the right screen selected. wpctl space sit-log-level. Now I'm going to go ahead and follow that with a -h so you can see the help command. And it tells you that it sets the log level of a client. No ID will mean wire plumb itself. 0 means the pipe wire server. Or you can use wpctl status to find out the command for a client device, sources, syncs, or streams. Especially if you've got a program that you're writing that you want to troubleshoot. So let's go ahead and just set the log level for wire plumber itself to, let's go with T. And now we're starting to see commands come through. And you've got a lot of commands there. Now let's go ahead and set Pipewire so we're seeing commands for it to T, which is going to trace everything. And we don't really see much change there. We do see Wire Plumber. And now let's go ahead and run a program. It's an example program from the Pipewire documentation covering how you can access the API. And be glad I'm not piping that into my audio output, because otherwise you'd hear a steady tone. Because I thought what that was an example of doing is creating a general steady tone. And as you can look, you can see that it's tracing what Pipewire is doing. So let's go back in and find out the where that program is. It's client is 80. So we can go in and set the log level to trace for client ID 80.
Oh. Well, that's cool.
And now you've got what it's doing coming through. And I'm just going to do a Control-C to cancel that. And you see where it gave you that closure. It's about to scroll off, isn't it?
Oh, that's a cool idea, though. I may have to steal that to be able to put just one thread, one application into Trace instead of the whole all of Pipewire or all of Wire Plumber.
Yep. But one thing I noticed is you can see where it's going through Pipewire or Wire Plumber with what I got set up so far. But if you go in and use inspect 80, and I don't know why, but I've gotten in the habit of always adding RNA. You can go in, look to see what you may want to look for with the grep command to probably look for that PID might help.
Yeah.
So we'll come back up here, exit out, and \pipe and paste that in. And we don't see anything. And run it again. And we're getting a few other things.
It happens. Do you know why it happens?
It's probably because it's not looking for that particular, getting anything from that particular PID since it's going to the Pipewire API.
I mean, if that's actually the program ID, it probably changed when you ran it a second time.
That could be that too. So let's go back and see if it did change. No, it didn't.
3413?
Still 80. That's the program itself.
Oh, yeah.
And 30414, the PID changed.
Yep. That's going to be what it is. Linux tends to not reuse those.
And what did I say that PID was again?
I thought I saw 3413.
Yep. Yeah, 1.3. And now let's see what we get. And looks like most of it's just Pipewire doing updates.
Yeah. There's where it ended. Yeah, good stuff. All right. Very useful to be able to figure out how to get in there and find log line messages from individual programs. I like it. That is the show. Those are the tips. We're going to let each of the guys plug whatever they want to. I will actually let Jeff go ahead and start us off with that. Any closing thoughts?
No, not anything too big. I think I shared a lot during the show this week. I was extra talkative, I think. So I'm just going to leave it with Poetry Corner. There was an end user named John whose desktop wouldn't respond. He called, made a fuss, send IT in a rush, and they turned it off and back on. Have a great week, everybody.
That's great. All right. Ken, anything you want to plug?
Yeah, I just want to share an article that I thought was rather interesting, is one way to put it, by Saurav Rudra about Eric S. Raymond's thoughts on codes of conduct.
Yes.
Read it. You may have some thoughts of your own after reading it.
Yep, it is a very interesting thing. I have thoughts as well. I will say this, the projects that I've involved in, I've gone back and looked at their codes of conduct to see if there are problematic things in there. Because I think there is something to be said for codes of conduct being weaponized against people when that's not what, at least most of us, when we agreed to them, that wasn't what the intent was. So worth at least doing a double check and making sure that you're not going to have a problem. So,
always
also
yes,
raising the question of, have they outlived their use?
Yep. Could be. All right. Appreciate you guys being here. It's been a lot of fun. We went for a long time with just the three of us. Goodness. Imagine if Rob had been here. We'd still be going.
Would have another hour on there?
Have another hour to go.
Well, we're bringing better value for the money.
That's right. Yeah. All right. Appreciate it. If you want to find more of me, there is, of course, Hackaday. That's where Floss Weekly lives. That's where my security column goes live every Friday morning. So make sure and check those out if you want to. We appreciate everybody that's here, those that listen, those that watch, whether you get us live or on the download. And we will be back next time for more of the Untitled Linux Show.